Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Michael Gerald. I'm an associate of SBDC. We're just going to give everyone another maybe 2 minutes or so for any late comers to sign in. All right. Good morning, everyone. This is again Michael Gerald, an associate of SBDC. I'll be here mostly as your moderator and just making sure that everything is going smoothly. Hopefully, WAPA doesn't cause any type of excitement this morning. I would like to introduce Dr. Michael T. Francois. Is a visiting assistant professor of the computer and science at the University of the Virgin Islands on the Albert A. Sheen campus, located on the island of St. Croix. Before teaching at the university, he taught for 4 years at Honeywell International Automation College in Phoenix, Arizona. Dr. Francois has served as a Territory Assistant Director for Career Technical Education and Adult Education. He has also served as the group leader for the Advanced Automation Group at the St. Croix Oil Refinery, where he worked for 19 years. He presently serves as the chair for the Virgin Islands Career and Technical Education Board. Dr. Francois is also a veteran who served a total of 9 years in the armed forces. Kudos to you. He also is dedicated in promoting cybersecurity and STEM. Dr. Francois participates in several youth programs to encourage cybersecurity and STEM education in the U.S. Virgin Islands. He is a mentor for the UBI Programming Club Attack on Tech, or AOT, which organized Dr. Francois. He is also a volunteer member of the Gentlemen of Scene and a cyber patriot clubs in St. Croix. He has credentials such as a PhD in Information Technology, a MAE in Teaching, a BA in Computer Science. He's a black belt in Lean Six Sigma. He also designed for Lean Six Sigma. So he holds many, many titles that would be very useful for us. So again, I would like to welcome Dr. Michael Francois. You have the floor, Mike.
Thank you. Let me get back to, for some reason, my slide moved. Okay. Good day, everyone. I'm Dr. Francois. I'll be introducing you to the fundamentals in cybersecurity. Some may already know the topics that I am going to cover, and for others, it may be brand new. The first thing I want to instill is that the weakest link in cybersecurity is humans, the user, employees, and if customers are allowed to access your network, then the customer. Let us first go over some basic cybersecurity concepts. The CIA triad, which is confidentiality. Confidentiality, keeping data hidden, keeping your data as a secret from those who do not need to use it. Then there is integrity. Integrity is about keeping the data from being modified by accident or by unauthorized individuals. Then the last letter in the CIA triad is availability. Availability is information or data is available when needed. You want to make sure that the information you have stored on your network is available to your employees and your customers or anybody else that you give access to the data when that data is needed. Data needs to remain confidential, keep its integrity, and be available to those who need it. So when you hear in the basic concepts, or when you hear somebody in cybersecurity talking about CIA, that's what they mean by that. Another basic concept is AAA. AAA stands for authentication, the first A, which is providing that you are who you are by passwords, username, and all the other logon information that you provide when you try to log into a program or a network. Then there is authorization. Authorization is the action that you can perform once authenticated. For instance, what files can you read? What files can you write to? What files can you modify? Then there is accountability. Accountability holds users responsible for their actions on the system. This is accomplished through login and auditing reports. So every time you log into the system, a good network system or a good network administrator or engineer will keep a log on how often you log in and what you did on that network, right? Auditing. So that way we could hold you responsible once you log into the network for anything that you do on that network. Another concept is defense in depth. Defense in depth is multiple layers of security to include policies, procedures, awareness, physical security, perimeter security, internal network security, host security, application security, and data security, to include virus protection. Now, a lot of times we do a lot of these protections on our network, but we forget to have our policies, procedures, and awareness. So we're going to talk a little more about those three things as we move along. But that's where I find most network security engineers or companies tend to leave out three things in the defense in depth. Then there's principle of least privilege. And for those of you that are veterans, have been in the military, you know what I'm talking about. Principles of least privilege means users should only have access to necessary information. Access to information only required to complete a task. So you only give individuals access to the information on your network that they need to complete their jobs. If they don't need access to certain information on the network, doesn't matter who they are, you shouldn't give them access. Then there's good faith. Good faith is where users should have it, basically. Any user that's on your network should have good faith. Users should protect the information on the network that they have access to. It should be protected in good faith. So anybody you give an access to your network should be going on there with the best intentions. Then one of my favorite is stewardship. Stewardship basically lets or informs us or is a concept where we know that engineers or network engineers or IT engineers do not own the network. They are surrogates of the data, not the owner. Management owns the data. In a lot of companies, you find that the network or IT person feels that they own the network and they'll dictate what takes place on the network and who has access. No, management should be making those decisions, and the engineers just enforcing it, right? The engineers are like our police officers. Management makes the rules and they enforce it. And then the OSI model. By knowing the different layers of the open system interconnection model or OSI model, you will have a better understanding of your security needs. So then you'll have a better understanding of what policies, procedures you need to put in place to protect your data, to protect your network. Let's talk a little bit about security policy. If you have an organization and you do anything with the internet, you have your own computer network, security network, or you use computers, period, then you should have a security policy. You should have a written security policy, not something that, okay, we understand, but we should have a written security policy. A security policy should cover the most likely threats to the network and how best to minimize them. A risk assessment should indicate how likely those threats are. It should give a dollar amount that it will cost the company if the threat happens. And it should indicate how often the threat may occur during the year. So you should do a risk assessment to include that information in your security policy. The policy must cover laws and regulations that apply to the organization. So federal laws, local laws, state laws, and so forth should be considered and placed in your policies if they're gonna affect your company, if your company has to live by those laws and regulations that the government has. The policy should indicate clear defined roles and responsibilities, involve management in the creation and sign off on the policy. So basically what I'm saying here is that you should, from day one, you should get management involved in the writing of the policy. They may not write it themselves, but they should be involved. And they should sign off on the policies, and they should be the ones promoting those policies. You want a top-down approach to policies, right? Or your written policy. Otherwise, if your IT people are who writes those policies, the staff and management is not involved in it, a lot of times the staff ignore it, especially if they notice that upper management or your executive staff is not taking those policies serious, then the regular staff, the line staff, tend to ignore those policies also. So it's very important that you get management involved. It should be a high-level document that is understandable by all employees. It should be broad rather than technology specific. This approach will reduce how often the policy will need to be updated. Based on your security policy, technology-specific procedures should be written. Procedures will need to be updated often, but the security policy should not. So your company should have some sort of bylaws, and then based on those bylaws, you would have your policies, and one of those policies will be your security policy. And based on your security policies, you should have procedures. And procedures is telling specifically what needs to be done in a certain instance to support that policy. Any questions so far? Okay, let's move on. Acceptable user policy. That should be included in your security policy. What an acceptable user policy is, or AUP, it specifically indicates to end users what they are allowed or not allowed to do on the network. All employees should have to sign the AUP, preferably on their initial employment date, indicating that they understand and will abide by the AUP. So basically what the AUP does is let the employee know what they could do on your network, what websites they could visit. Are they allowed to surf the web? Are they allowed to have personal emails coming through your network, and so forth? Just sets the standard from day one on what your employees are allowed to do. That's what the AUP does. Training. It actually should be training and awareness. A lot of times we talk about training, but awareness is just as important. The title slide stated training, but awareness is just as important. Employees should be made aware of cyber incidents that took place at other organizations. That way they can recognize the threats when confronted. Educate end users and IT staff. Chances are that an employee will quicker jeopardize confidential files than an outside hacker. Educate all staff on how to conduct themselves to reduce actions that may cause a security breach. Remember, end users will perform their jobs in the easiest way possible and not the most secure way. That should be taken into consideration when developing policies and procedures, right? We all do it at one time or another. We look for the easiest way to do our jobs. And if your security policies are just too restricted, guess what? Employees will violate those policies. So you have to take all that into consideration when you're developing policies. New employees should be required to complete basic security education before starting their new job. Security policies and procedures should always be available to employees. They should be somewhere on your website or on a bookshelf in the office somewhere where you have your security policies and procedures that your employees have access to. Especially procedures in case you have some sort of cyber incident, then your employees could grab the procedure and see how they should be responding to that incident. Physical security. Let's talk a little bit about physical security. Implement physical security. Most compromises are done due to lack of physical security. Physical security is often overlooked. Once individuals gain access to the physical network infrastructure, most other security mechanisms are useless. Once somebody has direct access to your network or direct access to your servers or direct access to your computers, your laptops, then these other protections that you have on software and security software and virus protection becomes useless. So physical security is very important. You should include physical security in your organization's security policy. Define restricted and non-restricted areas in your policies. take appropriate measure to secure restricted areas. So a restricted area, or one place that should be a restricted area, is whatever room you keep your servers in. That should be a restricted area. State who is allowed to access restricted areas. Follow the principle of least privilege that we talked about earlier. Consider locking down end user workstations, blocking USB ports that, especially if you're not going to use them, but on employees' computers, they should be blocked. You should also consider restricting the ability to load and download software. The only people that I would give that ability to are my IT personnel. And if you're at a small office, then you should have one person responsible for loading and downloading software for everybody. Configure workstations with timeout, logout. So what that helps with is if you have an employee working on a computer and they get up and walk away from the station, that after a certain amount of time, that station will log out, and whoever comes to that station will have to log back in. That way it protects you from somebody randomly going on the station and interfering or putting your network at risk. Eliminate unauthorized network equipment. If you don't allow no one to add equipment or unauthorized equipment to your network, and if you have equipment that's not being used anymore or you don't have a need for, then unplug it from your network. Rogue wireless access points, those deserve special attention, right? I've seen that in the past where employees bring in their own access points and connect it to the network because for some reason your access point is denying them access to certain things they want to do or look at on the web and so forth. So you want to make sure you don't have no rogue wireless access points connecting to the network or the ability to do that. Disable open Ethernet jack accessible to end users. So if you have an open Ethernet jack, then you want to disable that so no one can just come and plug a laptop or something to your network or desktop to your network. Visitors should always be supervised, even in non-restricted areas. So if you have visitors come into your office, you should always supervise them, always keep an eye out on them. Especially in this day and age, you never know, a visitor might have been sent by your competition, right? And not only maybe to sabotage your network or your business, but to copy or to gather information on your business to bring back to your to the other companies that's competing with you, to competition. Parameter security. When we talk about parameter security, we talk about trust versus untrust zones. The basic concept of parameter security is trust versus untrust zones, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Everything within your firewall or network security application is trusted. Everything outside of your firewall is untrusted. Best practice is to only allow one point in your perimeter where data can go in and out. So in your firewall, you only want one hole where data could come in and go out, or one door or one opening in your firewall to allow data in and out from the untrusted network to your network. Any questions so far? Okay. Consider adding a third zone, which is the demilitarized zone, or DMZ. This is used by organizations that may need to allow the public access to certain servers. So if for some reason you allow your customers to shop on your network, shop on your website and so forth, you don't want that access, you don't want them to have direct access to your trusted network. So you create a DMZ where they have to go from the untrusted network to your DMZ and then to your trusted network. Just keep in mind, however, those servers that are in your DMZ are vulnerable to attacks. The DMZ, like I mentioned earlier, should go through your firewall when it's sending data to the trusted network. Let's talk a little bit about password management. In a lot of cases, that's where, especially with employees, that's where you see a lot of security violations. You should have a password policy. You should require a minimum password length. And a lot of companies now are doing the 8-character minimum password. Passwords must contain both upper and lowercase characters, at least one non-alphanumeric, and at least one number. So you want to have a length, you want to have both alpha and numeric characters, and then you want to have at least one non-alphanumeric character in your passwords, password policy. Password should be changed at least every 90 days. And you want to set up a policy where previous 10 passwords may not be used. That's a very good practice, best practice. Passwords from default accounts must be changed. So a lot of times when we buy routers and different equipment, and even sometimes different software, they come with default passwords. And a lot of times we don't change those passwords. We just put those nodes on our network and move forward with that. But you should change all default passwords. And I would even sometimes, if you can, change the default usernames. When an employee is no longer with the company, their account should be disabled and eventually removed. Password login report, you should have a password login report, and we mentioned that earlier, where every time a user logs in, you have that is stored in a log, letting you know when what time the user logged in, how long the user was logged in for, how successful they were with the login, and if they failed, how many times they failed when trying to log in. And most important, users should never share their passwords. I don't care if it's your coworker, you all do the same job. That's why we give passwords, right? So we know who was on the system. And if you have a password and you share your password, then you're responsible for anything the other person does on that network. In addition, I discourage users to write passwords down. I see people write their passwords and stick it to the monitor or on the desk or in the drawer, and that creates a security hazard also. Failure to abide by the previous passwords suggestions defeats the purpose of having passwords. Enforcing a password policy is easy because this functionality is built into most operating systems. However, no operating system can completely enforce password policy. Strong passwords are not as vulnerable to brute force dictionary attacks. And that's how most hackers attack trying to get your password. They use brute force dictionary attack software to do that. Eliminate unnecessary services. Let's talk a little about that. Eliminate unnecessary online, sorry, not online, but unnecessary services. Only have open ports for services that are necessary. There is a well-known port for each specific service. And as you can see on the screen, here are some of them. Use the commands specific to the server operating system to make sure only necessary ports are open. Use a firewall to drop packets on unnecessary ports before the packet gets to the server. So if you're not using a port, disable it. Because if you don't disable it, that's just leaving a door open for hackers and malicious users, right? Let's talk a little bit about patch management. Patch management. Ensure that all applicable patches are applied to your network as quickly as possible after they are published. A lot of software companies, they're always sending these patches out because they realize that their software that they sold you has some sort of discrepancy, especially security. Good patch management. A good patch management procedure is identify patches made available by vendors, identify the host on your network that need these patches, download the patches, test the patches on the test systems on your network. Always test patches before you install them. Deploy patches that test okay to all hosts on your network that need those patches. For large patch deployments, use automated software. There's software that will help you install those patches when you have a large network. You may want to do that. Antivirus measures. We all talk about antivirus and know about antivirus. Antivirus usually means all malware to include viruses, worms, and Trojan horses or Trojans. Each user workstation should have antivirus software installed on it. Each server should have antivirus software installed on it. Use centralized antivirus management software for enterprise networks. Schedule signature update outside of your work hours because of updates can be resource intensive. Determine how you will handle workstations with outdated signatures. You may have to quarantine these stations. Keep in mind that laptops can be challenging because laptops may not be on the network when updates are being completed. So what you may have to do with laptops is when the users come back to the office, they may have to turn their laptop into your IT personnel. So those laptops could be updated, or have it set up where once they plug the laptop to the system, system verifies to see if the antivirus is updated and forces them to update the antivirus software before they're allowed to do anything on your network. Let's talk a little bit about access control. Access control is basically permissions. What an end user is allowed to do on the system depends on the account used and what the account has been configured to allow the user to do. Configure accounts to allow users the access right necessary to perform their job, but no more. Remember, we talked about least privileged. We only want users to be able to perform just what their job requires on your network. Access rights consist of the account's ability to access files and directories. Create these rights on a Linux or creating these rights on a Linux or Windows operating system is very basic admin function. For ease of administration, assign rights to groups of accounts rather than individual accounts. Yeah, if you go through doing it individually, then every time you bring in a new employee or you promote somebody, then you have to go in and make changes to their individual account. But if you create groups like management group, supervisor group, assistant administrative group, then you give those groups rights. And all you have to do is add the user account in there when you want them to have those specific rights. And when you don't want them to have those rights, you remove them from that account and put them in the most appropriate account. Remote access permissions need to be considered. Do you want, if you allow your employees to have remote access, like from home or from their hotel, if they travel and so forth, do you want them to have the same amount of rights they would have if they're sitting in the office? Or would you want to limit the rights they have remotely? VPN should be considered when allowing remote access. There are two types of VPN, site-to-site and client-based VPN. If you're dealing with individuals, you want to give them client-based VPN and not site-to-site. The only time you really want to use site-to-site VPN is, for instance, if you have an office on St. Croix and you have an office in St. Thomas, and you want both of them to have access to a specific network, then you would do site-to-site. So the St. Croix office, as soon as they log in from that office, they will have direct access to the network in St. Thomas and vice versa. But as individuals, you don't want to do site-to-site because you don't want someone going to a hotel and they have site-to-site access and they just log in or turn on the computer and have full access to the network that way, because anybody could grab that laptop and do that then. Securing data transfer. Securing your data is, securing data as it is being transferred is very important. Data transferred across the internet or Wi-Fi can be sniffed by hackers. Therefore, you should encrypt it. Cryptology is the science of concealing information from others. It allows us to achieve different security goals to include confidentiality, integrity, and authentication. Remember, we talked about that earlier. And then there's also one more thing it allowed, which is non-reputation, which basically means that once somebody sends an email or they send data across the network, the fact that you have you've encrypted the data and you've made it difficult for somebody else to change the data, whatever they sent over the network, they can't deny and say they didn't do that, right? And that's your goal. You want, for instance, if an employee sent a letter to you, you want to make sure that other than having that employee's username and password or access to that user account, which still holds the user responsible, that nobody else could have tampered with the message. So whatever the user said in that email, they're responsible for it. Secure data with a site-to-site VPN if communication is being done from company offices at different locations. I mentioned that earlier. Secure data with a client-based VPN if communication is being done from employee laptops or workstations outside the organization. Take steps to secure your Wi-Fi with WPA2. You have WPA2 Personal and WPA2 Enterprise, right? And then you want to secure web transactions. All web transactions should be secured. You want to make sure they're secure. Intrusion detection, intrusion prevention services. IDS, or intrusion detection services or service, is designed to detect malicious action. Right? IPS, intrusion prevention services, is designed to prevent malicious actions. There's two types of IPS. IPS can be either network-based or host-based. And it could also be, within that, it could also be signature-based anomaly or anomaly-based, or it could be both signature-based and anomaly-based. And both of those have their own pros and cons. Most modern IPS are signature-based, deployed in a physical security appliance. So a lot of times, the IPS is signature-based, which basically means that your antivirus and different softwares have these signatures based on previous security threats that they keep. You know, what's the characteristic of certain viruses and certain worms and so forth. And your IPS, based on those characteristics that they have, they could identify these threats ahead of time based on the characteristics. Where anomaly-based looks at how your network is usually ran, what typically happens on your network, and if it sees something that's totally different compared to the usual, then it will alert or prevent that from taking place. Backup is very important, even for a personal user, right? Where you know, you try to back up your data and everything on USB drives and so forth. You should back up your network, and nodes automatic backup is encouraged. So you should back up your computers and your networks, your servers. There are 3 strategies to automatic backup: enterprise solution, which only backs up data; small office, home office solution, which only backs up data; and image solution, which backs up applications. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. Do you have any questions for me? Okay, if you don't have any questions, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing and go from there. Hey, Mr. Fleming, how you doing, sir? I recognize Curtis, but I guess he's not answering. Who else I recognize?
Mr. Francois, how you doing, sir?
How you doing, sir? It's a pleasure to see you here. Anybody has any questions for me? Comments?
Well, I enjoy your presentation. I was listening keenly. I see you are pretty sharp on the subject still.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I try to stay sharp.
This is Kiyama Rahman. I have a question.
Sure.
Can you hear me? Yes. Can you talk about hacking?
Oh, that's a large topic. That would have to be a presentation in itself. You know, but you know, hacking basically is, and there are different types of hacking, right? Actually, initially, when you say hacking, that means a good person that was there to protect your network. Now you have red hackers and blue hackers and black hackers and all different types of hacking. But hacking is basically somebody's trying to gain access to your network and gain access to your data. There's different ways of achieving that goal, such as phishing and you know, open, find doors like the ports I mentioned, making sure these ports are closed, because a lot of times that's what hackers do. But more importantly, if you take anything, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, if you take anything away from this today, remember, a lot of times when you say you've been hacked or somebody gained access to your network, is because of something that an employee did that was against policy. And give a good example of that, right? I don't know the full details of what took place with WAPA, but I don't know if y'all remember earlier this year where they talked about WAPA somehow lost that 2.3 million or whatever, and it was through some email that they received saying they were past due on on their account, and whoever is supposed to pay that or deal with that account went ahead and clicked the link in the email and paid the account, right? Only to find out that that money is gone and it didn't actually go to the account it was supposed to go to. So as you can see, that was failure of a employee, right? And when I say failure of an employee, it might be failure of the organization too, not to have policies in place. One best practice that I do, for instance, if I get an email, and sometimes we get these emails from our banks or our credit card saying, okay, you're past due, click on this link to pay your bill or whatever. I typically don't click on the link. I open my browser and I go to the company's website as I know it, and then pay my bill that way. I don't pay my bill through the link that was sent in the email. Now, of course, I know how to check those links to make sure that they're legit, but for the average person, you may not know that, or you may not have the time. So the best way to do that, or the best way they should have done that with WAPA, and I don't know the full details, I'm just based on the little bit I know, is go to that company's website or call that company up and or go through the regular means of paying that account instead of clicking on that link. Yes, I hope that helped.
Yeah. Mr. Francois, I wanted for you to actually go through the site-to-site VPN. I understand the individual VPN, but could you go a little bit deeper in the explanation, or if you think that that's something that we on this side need to understand?
Well, it's something you would need to understand, but again, a lot of these topics, I just touched on them because these topics in themselves could take like hour, 2 hours or more, right? Mm-hmm. But what I'm going to tell you with the site-to-site VPN, you only want to use site-to-site VPN is if your company or your organization has remote or satellite offices, right? So if you have satellite offices and you all do business on a daily basis, you all share the same network or need access to the same data, same network, then you want to do a site-to-site VPN. That way, anybody in the St. Croix office, once they're in the St. Croix office and they connect their laptop to one of your Ethernet ports or to your Wi-Fi, and they could connect to the network on St. Thomas, because now you have site-to-site VPN, right? Whereas if it's individuals, like a lot of times, the company, your organizations have people traveling and doing business from hotel rooms, from home and so forth, you definitely want to have that individual VPN. You don't want site to site, because you don't want your employee having that kind of access where site to site from their home to your network, right? Anybody at their house could connect to your network. You don't want that. Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe we could talk about, maybe I don't know if you own a company, but maybe coming in and actually doing a training, me, Dr. Mr. Kentop, doing a training on Professor Kentop, doing a training specifically for your organization on site-to-site VPN.
Right. No, it's just a question. And could you touch a little bit more on what policies should be looking like as it pertains to network?
Okay. Well, like I said, when I was discussing policies, you need to do a risk management assessment. Mm. And by doing a risk management assessment, you would get a better understanding of what type of risk that your company or your organization is vulnerable to. And based on that, then you would create your policies to address those risks. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you.
Any other questions? I got two, let's see. Okay, I think I touched on that. Hacking, can you talk about hacking? Yeah, I kind of touched on that, but that in itself is, is a whole nother topic, right? Any other questions, folks?
It's me again, Alexis.
Yes.
Going back to audits, like again, because I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around policies, how audits should be done, how often they should be done. How often you think like audits should be done, and are those typically done by an IT individual, or is there some type of software that kind of kicks out a report?
Well, yes, your most operating systems allow you, have these login reports and audit reports that you could do through your operating system. And that should be reviewed by your IT personnel. Mm-hmm. However, how often depends on how much traffic you have on your network, right? If you're a small business and you don't have much traffic, me telling you do it on a weekly basis would be self-defeating. It would be more work than needed. So right. It's based on the amount of traffic you have on your network will determine how often you should be looking at your audit reports, your login reports, and so forth.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I could go on and on with questions too, so but I'm a stop. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay. I guess if you don't have any more questions, I guess that would. Michael, are you there? Are you available, sir?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Okay. Yes. If they have any more no more questions, what's our next move?
Well, if there's no more questions, then I think it would be safe to say that we can end the webinar there. Again, you can always reach out to the SBDC office. You can reach out to myself or Dr. Francois if you have any questions or concerns, or if you need any help with anything specific. But again,
and sorry, let me just, I don't know if they saw my email address at the beginning of the presentation, but my email is simply michaeltfrancois@mfit.org. So if you need to reach out to me, you have questions, you need help with something, just shoot me an email.
Dr. Francois?
Yes, ma'am.
Mary Jo Williams here. Thank you very much for the presentation, but I want to encourage everybody to tune in next week at the same time so that they can get part 2 of this cybersecurity information that's going to be presented by Mr. Timothy Kentop.
Yeah, can you repeat your email again?
Oh, my email is Michael T. Francois. Don't forget the T, because there's a lot of Michael Francois out there, or Michelle Francois. So Michael T. Francois at MFIT, so mango, fruit, internet, tango. I know it's not military, right, Curtis? .org.
I also included his email in the chat for everyone to see it as well.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And please don't miss Mr. Kentop's presentation next week. He will be going into more details on some of the topics that I covered. Okay. He'll be going a little more technical than I did. I just wanted to make sure that at least you all got the fundamentals. And if you want to go more technical, you could look at him, you could email me, and we could have a discussion and see how I could help you with some of the more technical aspects. Thank you.
Thank you.
well, everyone have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.